Hi, I'm Liam. Welcome to Oxford Online English. In this lesson, you can learn to talk about different emotions in English.
You'll see how to talk about positive and negative feelings, about strong emotions and low-level emotions in different ways. Before we start, do you want more free English lessons? Visit our website, oxfordonlineenglish.com. You can also book English classes with our fully qualified teachers who can help you with your English speaking, writing, IELTS preparation, or whatever else you need.
This lesson has 4 parts. In each part, you'll learn 5 to 6 words related to 2 different main emotions like anger, fear, or happiness. Ready? Let's start. You look pleased. What's going on?
I finally passed my driving test. I'm so happy.
Wow, congratulations.
Thanks. It was my 6th attempt.
6th?
Yeah, I was really stressed beforehand. I've been feeling nervous for days and I haven't been sleeping well. But in the end, it went well.
That sounds stressful. What made you so scared? I mean, it's not the end of the world to fail your driving test.
I don't know. I just built it up in my head and it became this huge thing. I honestly can't remember feeling so worried about anything in my life before.
You must be relieved to get it over with.
For sure. If I'd failed again, I think I'd just have given up.
Well, no need to think about that now.
Look at 6 words to describe feelings which you heard in the dialogue. First, a question. 3 of these words relate to feeling fear. Which 3? Nervous, worried, and scared are all feelings of fear. Do you know how they're different?
Nervous and worried are both low-level fear. Scared describes a more intense feeling. To describe extreme levels of fear, for example, if you're in a life-threatening situation, you could use adjectives like terrified or petrified. What about the other 3 adjectives, pleased, stressed, and relieved? One is different from the other 2. Which one? Stressed is different because it's an unpleasant emotion. Pleased is similar to happy, but pleased is a reaction to a situation. What does this mean?
In English, there are many pairs of words with a similar meaning, but one is used to describe a general state, while the other is used to describe a reaction to a specific situation. Happy and pleased are an example of this. So you can be happy generally or for long periods of time. You could say she was happy throughout her retirement. However, pleased can't be used like this. You feel pleased at one specific time. For example, I was pleased with how my painting turned out.
Here you could also use happy. Happy can replace pleased, but not the other way round. There are other pairs like this, for example, sad, upset, or angry, cross. The first word has a general meaning, and the second describes your reaction to something specific. Finally, what about relieved? What does that mean?
You might feel relieved when you're free from pressure or stress. If you have a problem and the problem is solved, you might feel relieved. Or if you have an exam and you think you might fail, you feel relieved when you pass. Let's look at our next section.
In this section, we have a challenge for you. You'll hear a dialogue as usual. There are 6 words relating to emotions in the dialogue. Listen and try to write them down.
How's work going?
Ugh, don't ask.
Going well then?
Don't even joke about it. I feel miserable. I dread going in every morning and every day feels like an eternity.
Yeah, you seem a bit down. But a couple of months ago, you said things were going okay.
They were, or I thought they were. That's the problem. I'm so mixed up. Working in the fashion industry was always my dream. I worked so hard to get an opportunity, but then reality started to bite.
What do you think went wrong?
I'm supposed to be an event manager, but they don't actually let me make any decisions. I spend all day doing menial work. We had a team meeting last week, and they asked me to go out and get coffee. I felt so humiliated.
So, what are you going to do? You can't stay there, surely.
I don't know. I'm torn. On the one hand, you're right, I can't stay there. But on the other, what am I going to do? I was out of work for 3 months and I need the money right now.
It's a tricky situation.
The worst thing is, it's affecting everything else in my life too. I don't go out or do anything after work or at weekends. I just feel kind of apathetic. I don't have the energy to go anywhere.
Well, I don't know, but it doesn't sound like you can go on like this.
Did you get the 6 words? If you want, you can go back and listen again. Here are the 6 words you heard. These words relate to feelings of sadness, shame, and confusion. Can you put the words into 3 groups?
Miserable and down are both feelings of sadness. Miserable is a strong word which describes a deep unhappiness. Down is often used when you're going through a difficult time in your life and you feel unhappy generally.
Apathetic is also a feeling of sadness, although it's a little different. If you feel apathetic, you don't care about anything or have any interest in things. Feeling apathetic means you don't have much energy, and it's difficult to motivate yourself to do anything. Be careful not to mix up apathetic and pathetic. They sound similar, but the meanings are not related.
Next, mixed up and torn are both feelings of confusion. They both mean that you're caught between different possibilities and you don't know what to do. To remember the word torn, think about the verb tear. If you tear a piece of paper, you rip it into pieces. If you feel torn, it's as if you're being pulled in 2 different directions.
Humiliated is a strong form of embarrassed, meaning a deep feeling of shame. It has a strong meaning, so you wouldn't use it often. Any plans for this weekend?
No, not really. I had something, but it didn't work out.
Something?
Well, I'm a little embarrassed to say. Okay, fine. I had a blind date arranged.
Nothing wrong with that, but now it's not happening?
No, I canceled it. I was feeling quite anxious. I've never been on a blind date, and I can imagine it would be really awkward, so I called it off.
Sure, I guess it could be, but it could be fun too. I think you should go. It's normal to feel apprehensive before you go on a first date. You shouldn't let it stop you.
Too late now, though. I already canceled it. Now I'm kind of regretting it.
Well, maybe you can still make it happen. Why not make a call?
I can't. I feel guilty for canceling.
You can't win, it seems.
You heard 5 words related to feelings. Can you remember them? Try to complete the words. Pause the video if you want more time. Remember that you can also go back and review the dialogue if you want to. Ready? Let's see the answers. These words relate to shame and nervousness. Can you put them into 2 groups?
Anxious and apprehensive describe fear. Like the words nervous and worried, which you saw earlier, they express a low-level fear, like you might feel before a first date or an important exam. Awkward, embarrassed, and guilty relate to shame, but they don't have the same meaning. Could you explain the difference between them? Awkward means you feel socially uncomfortable. For example, if you're trying to start a conversation with someone, but you don't know what to say, you might feel awkward. Embarrassed is the feeling when you blush. Your face turns red.
You feel guilty when you think you've done something bad. For example, imagine that your friend asks you for some help, and you say, "Sorry, I can't. I'm too busy." Later, you learn your friend really needed your help. You might feel guilty for not helping. Let's look at the last section. Whoa, where are you going?
I'm going to walk into his office and tell him exactly what I think of him.
That's not a good idea. I know you're annoyed.
Annoyed? I'm seething. I'm fed up with this place. Let him sack me if he wants.
Let's just take a minute. Why don't you tell me what happened?
What happened? This isn't something new. I've been overwhelmed for weeks. I asked for help and he doesn't even answer my emails or my messages. He's supposed to be in charge of this department and he's not even doing his job.
Sure, I can understand that you're frustrated, but...
It's more than that. He still hasn't even bought the design software we need. The deadline is next week. I've never seen such incompetence.
Look, I would be upset too in your position. But getting into a shouting match with him is not going to solve anything. How about this? We go and we have a cup of tea for 10 minutes and then you decide what to do. If you still want to march into his office and scream at him, I won't stop you, but just take 10 minutes with me first.
Okay, fine. Here, you heard 6 words relating to anger, frustration, or sadness. Here's a question. What does frustration mean?
Frustration is a kind of anger, but it relates to situations where you can't get what you want. For example, imagine you have to catch a train and you're late. You're driving to the station and someone in front of you is driving really slowly. You can't overtake, so you're stuck driving behind them. You might feel frustrated in this situation. Apart from frustrated, you heard these words in the dialogue. Do you know which emotions these words express? And could you explain their meanings in detail? Think about it and pause the video if you need some help.
Annoyed and seething both express anger, but at different levels. Annoyed is a low-level anger. For example, if you have some mosquito bites and they're itchy, you might feel a little annoyed, but you wouldn't probably be fully angry. You could also say irritated, which has the same meaning. Seething means extremely angry. You could also say furious, which is similar.
Fed up expresses frustration. If you feel fed up with something, a bad situation has gone for a long time and you can't take it anymore. For example, if your neighbor plays loud music one evening, you might be annoyed. But maybe it wouldn't be a big problem. However, if your neighbor plays loud music every evening, you feel angry and frustrated, and after a few days, you'll probably feel fed up. You've had enough of the situation, and you cannot take any more.
Overwhelmed is hard to classify. Overwhelmed means something like defeated or buried. If you're overwhelmed, you have so many problems and negative feelings that you can't cope anymore. In the dialogue, we were talking about work, but you can be overwhelmed with other emotions and situations too. For example, you can be overwhelmed with anger, overwhelmed with sadness, overwhelmed with stress, and so on. It can, even, sometimes, be positive. For example, you can be overwhelmed with happiness. In this case, that means you're so happy that you don't know what to do with yourself.
Finally, upset is a feeling of sadness in response to a specific situation. If something bad happens to you or someone says something unpleasant to you, you might feel upset. We've mentioned many different words to describe feelings in this video, but there are also many that we didn't talk about. Can you think of any? Share your ideas in the comments. Thanks for watching.
See you next time.